continuing our series for January and the new year by exploring some interesting new ideas that are found in this book up here called The Big Picture by Caltech theoretical physicist Sean Carroll. And one of the big new ideas in the big picture is something that Dr. Carroll calls poetic naturalism. Poetic naturalism. Naturalism, that's the scientific worldview. Naturalism means that there's one world, the natural world around us, that we can see and observe, this natural world that operates according to natural laws and principles that we can discern and discover. We can discern how reality works and the rules that it follows. And that's the natural side. The poetic side is all about how we talk about it. All about how we talk about that one reality. There's one reality, but there are many ways that we talk about it. Different stories that we can tell about it. I've been sharing this next quote here from the book just about every week because I like it so much. He says, the poet Muriel Rukeyser once wrote, "The universe is made of stories, not atoms." That is absolutely correct. There is more to the world than what happens. There are the ways we make sense of it by telling its story. The vocabulary we use is not handed to us from outside. It's ultimately a matter of our choice. And so as they say, we want to choose wisely. And one of the choices that we make when we're talking about this world, this natural reality, is how we deal with the concepts of right and wrong, morality and ethics. And I think we're totally on our own when it comes to making this choice. The universe basically doesn't care. The universe is indifferent to what we do. If we should succeed in destroying the planet and everything on it, the universe will trundle along without us just the same as it has over the 14 billion years that it's been here so far, just the same as if we'd never been here. And on the other hand, if we should succeed in creating heaven on earth, the universe will continue along in all of its vastness, totally indifferent to our little corner of the world. The rules operate the same everywhere. The universe doesn't care, but, and this is really important, we do. The universe doesn't care, but we care. We get to care. And that's what makes all the difference. That's the thing that puts the responsibility back where it belongs. No excuses. And that's one of the things that a lot of people find really challenging about the unity message. The degree of personal responsibility that it requires. We don't get to say, the devil made me do it, when we break the rules. Do you remember who used to say that? I'm dating myself here. This very funny man named Flip Wilson, those of you who may not be familiar with him, those of you who are too young to remember Flip Wilson, he played this character called Geraldine. That's who he's dressed up as up there. And of course, this is actually one of his comedy albums that I used to own. And it says, "The devil made me buy this dress." If you can't make out those words, the devil made me buy this dress. And even though we don't get to say the devil made me do it, in this case, I believe him. But wild dresses aside, for the most part, no excuses. No excuses. And it's not just the devil that we use as an excuse, right? Sometimes God gets the blame. Remember that story in the Bible about Abraham and his son Isaac? Isaac, he's the only child of Abraham and Sarah, the child who was given to them in their old age when they thought that they were way past childbearing. Along comes Isaac, the apple of his parents' eye. And so God decides to test Abraham's faith and his loyalty by telling him to take the boy to a certain place, kill him, and burn him as a sacrifice to him. That's the story. And it makes it clear that Isaac was a child. It's an appalling story. To think that there's a God who would be called good, who could ask someone to do such a thing, or the converse, that there was somebody who could be so morally depraved that they'd actually start to do it. And believe me, Abraham was actually going to do it. He had the boy tied up. He had the wood stacked under him for the fire. He had the knife raised up in the air. And it was only then that God said, stop. Just kidding, Abraham. It was all a test of your loyalty. No, it was child abuse. You can and should be prosecuted today for something like that. And yet, there are still people who rationalize what Abraham did, saying things like, well, he was only being obedient to God. And if it was truly the will of God, then Abraham was blameless. And we're not to question or judge it. No harm, no foul. A child is going to be in therapy for the rest of his life, probably. Another form of cop-out is what that is. And it's even worse than the devil made me do it, because this is evil masquerading as good. And you can find many other versions of this story in other places in the Bible. There's God commanding Joshua to commit genocide and things like that. These are stories that remind us of how human beings are very, very good at rationalizing atrocities. Shoot first, justify it later. You can always find a way, right? I find it remarkable that we get along as well as we do in the world, really. And I think one of the reasons that we do is because we're getting better at communication. For better or worse, and I think in many cases for better, technology has made the world a smaller place, which means that we get to know who our neighbor truly is. Proximity, that closeness, allows us to see and really experience that we're not really all that different from each other when you get right down to it. It's basically the golden rule at work. And I think the credit has to go to evolution. Do a Google search sometime for evolution and altruism. Put those terms in there together and you'll see what I mean, because what you'll get are references to thousands of books and papers where people talk about how the more complex our society becomes, the more complex our social structures become, the more likely it is that living creatures are going to engage in behavior that is beneficial to fellow creatures, sometimes even at the temporary cost of our own safety or well-being. That's the essence of altruism, to engage in behavior that's beneficial to another person and at times when it's a detriment to me to do so. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Evolution is eventually going to help us to get closer and closer to more and more peace on earth. It's not like it's handed to us from the outside. We learn how to construct goodness. We're the ones who are constructing goodness for ourselves and for our neighbors. Religion can't give it to us. Neither can science. Here's what Sean Carroll says about the role of science in helping us to figure out how to get along. He says, deciding how to be good isn't like solving a math puzzle or discovering a new fossil. It's like going out to dinner with a group of friends. We think about what we want for our individual selves, talk to others about their desires and how we can work together, and we reason about how to make it happen. The group may include both vegetarians and omnivores, but with a good faith effort, there's no reason everyone can't be satisfied. What's that thing that we say at the beginning of the service? Co-creating a world that works for all? Yeah, that's kind of what he's getting at here. And as you can see, it's not a scientific thing. The world of reality goes on, but we have to get into this conversation. We have to engage in the conversation. He goes on to say in the book, he says, a good poetic naturalist should resist the temptation to hand out commandments. I like that. A good poetic naturalist should resist the temptation to hand out commandments. There's no such thing as one size fits all when it comes to constructing goodness. We might think that things like the Ten Commandments give us absolute objective standards, but we're constantly carving out exceptions to them, aren't we? Just one example. Thou shalt not kill. Pretty plain, pretty clear when you read it in the original. Thou shalt not kill. Some people interpret it as murder. And then they start carving out exceptions, except in self-defense, or except in war, or a just war, or except in cases of capital punishment, or whenever God says that it's okay to kill. And there are plenty of people out there who believe they have a direct line to the divine that says that it's okay to engage in various acts of terrorism and so on, and that's what God wants them to do. And we do the same with others. So that hasn't worked out. That hasn't worked out very well for us. So instead of commandments, in this book, Dr. Carroll offers what he calls 10 considerations. The 10 considerations. And what these can do is help us to guide us in that conversation, what he referred to as like a dinner conversation with friends about how to construct goodness in the world. So here we go. The 10 considerations. And we may as well start out with the big one here. Number 1, life isn't forever. Even if you believe in an afterlife, or even if you believe in reincarnation, and incidentally, reincarnation was never meant to be a reward. If you get reincarnated, it means you screwed up somewhere and you need to go through this again. The whole goal in Buddhism with reincarnation is to stop the reincarnation, right? But even if you do believe in reincarnation or an afterlife, it's not a good idea to go through this life like it's a dress rehearsal for some kind of a real show that's yet to come. Because we tend to lose our motivation. We lose our sense of urgency. We lose our sense of how important this life and this moment is right now. Not just to us as individuals, but really to everyone around us, to all of us collectively. So we need that little bit of motivation, that sense of urgency, that sense that this life is precious so that we're going to do something about it now instead of thinking that, oh, well, I'll take care of it later. All right, number 2. Desire is built into life. Everyone has drives, preferences, and they appear to be part of our genetic structure. They might be part of that primitive animal part of our brain that's going to be with us forever. And they may shape us, but they don't enslave us. That's because one of the gifts of consciousness, at least the kind of self-reflective consciousness that human beings have, is that we can use that reflection, that self-awareness to control our desires instead of the other way around. And this is really the Buddhist message, right? The Buddha says life is suffering, and much of our suffering is due to our desires. And what we have to learn how to do is to deal with those desires rather than letting them run roughshod in our lives. Our self-reflective consciousness means that we get to focus on other things, how to make the world a better place, how to keep our desires in check so that we're not oppressing, persecuting, and exploiting. All right, number 3. What matters is what matters to people. This is kind of getting back to something I said before. The universe doesn't care about us, but we care about the universe. We are the caring structure, the caring expression of the universe. We bring the concept of caring into existence. If life matters, then it's because we care. And let's not just stop at human life. Let's remember that other living creatures are part of that mattering as well. But it starts with people because, again, we're the ones who possess that kind of self-reflective consciousness that makes that kind of thing possible. And that's a big deal. Or as Sean Carroll says, an achievement of which we can be justly proud. Number 4, we can always do better. We can always do better. Whenever we think that we've arrived, that's a good time to step back and remember that, no, this is probably just a temporary stop. There's always more that we can do. There's always more to unfold in this journey. This is from the book. He says, progress comes not from new discoveries in an imaginary science of morality, but from being more honest and rigorous with ourselves. Becoming better people is hard work. But by sifting through biases and being open to new ideas, our ability to be good advances. We can always do better. Number 5, it pays to listen. First of all, don't throw out those barbaric sounding Bible passages. Listen to what they're trying to tell us beyond the literal meaning of the words. Listen to what they're trying to tell us about human history and human behavior, where we've been and where we've come. Also, though, don't cling to outdated moral codes either. Listen to what we're learning today, new ideas, and above all, listen to each other. He says in the book to not only listen to others, but also to imagine ourselves as them. To consider what they care about is a powerful driver of moral progress. Number 6, there is no natural way to be. I found this one kind of amusing because we hear a lot of people talking about how we need to get back to nature, or we need to find a more natural way to live. Paleo diet, natural fibers, and so on. And I think, well, hey, why stop there? Why not just get so natural that we all wear animal skins and live in caves again? That's pretty natural too, right? That was a natural part of our evolutionary heritage. And what Dr. Carroll is saying here is that this idea of there being one single natural way to live, it's a meaningless concept. Our evolutionary past is so complicated and so convoluted that it becomes an exercise in futility to try to examine history and identify some period somewhere in the past where we were somehow closer to an ideal way of living. Each step in the process is essential. It offers something of value, and our focus should be to move forward and to include the gifts of those steps and lessons that we've learned in the past. They sometimes say we need to transcend and include what we've learned and been through. So we embrace the process now instead of trying to go back to something that we think is somehow more natural. Number 7, it takes all kinds, don't it?
Yep.
Ain't it the truth? People are different. So they're going to create different things. That's a feature to be celebrated, not an annoyance to be eradicated. We may not agree with how other people decide to live, but we have to make the effort to distinguish between what is different and what is actually dangerous. That's an important consideration. We have to distinguish between what is different and what is actually harmful or dangerous. Not easy. Really important though. At a minimum, we have to take that first step, which is to recognize that different does not equal dangerous. We may not choose it for ourselves, we may not agree with it, but that doesn't automatically make it dangerous. And yet so often our default position is to say, that's different, I would never do that, therefore I have to find some reason to call it dangerous. That's what we do. We need to flip that around and realize that different does not automatically equal dangerous. Number 8, the universe is in our hands. That's kind of a sobering realization, really. And I don't mean the fate of the universe, but what happens with this part of the universe that sustains us. And this is the one area where the Bible seems to agree with us, because there's that early story in Genesis, one of the two creation stories, where it says that mankind was given dominion and control over the planet and everything on it. Now, many have interpreted that as license to exploit the resources of the planet to the point of depletion and extinction. We don't need to pay attention to things like ecology, the climate, and things like that, because God gave us license to do with it as we please. Well, I got some bad news for those folks. What this passage in the Bible really means, this idea of dominion and control, is responsible stewardship. Because we're all in this together. Responsible stewardship. In the book, Dr. Carroll says, our ability to think, which is consciousness, once again, has given us enormous leverage over the world around us. It's up to us to make wise choices and to shape that world to be a better place. Number 9. We can do better than happiness. Isn't that interesting? Nothing wrong with being happy. That's not what he's saying at all. But it seems to have taken center stage. It's become the ultimate goal, and then it becomes the stopping point, right? Why don't we consider whether there might be something better than just striving for happiness? We can do better than that. We can aspire to something even greater. He says, at the end of the day, or the end of your life, it doesn't matter so much that you were happy much of the time. Wouldn't you rather have a good story to tell? Yeah. And finally, number 10. Reality guides us, if we let it. The truth is that everyone has a belief, or two maybe, that doesn't really correspond well to reality. But we hang on to them because they make us happier. And to some extent, it's harmless. Whatever gets you through the night, right? As John Lennon used to say, whatever gets you through the night, it's all right. However, we don't want to take comforting illusions or beliefs as final answers. So reality is our guide. We may have a few ideas that don't necessarily hold up to reality, but let's make sure that we're not taking comfortable illusions or beliefs as the final answers. And I think this goes along with the last consideration, that we can do better than happiness. He says, we have aspirations that reach higher than happiness. We've learned so much about the scope and workings of the universe and about how to live together and find meaning and purpose in our lives precisely because we are ultimately unwilling to take comforting illusions as final answers. So those are the 10 considerations that help us to take the responsibility that we've been handed for constructing goodness, for guiding our conversations and our interactions. And you might have noticed throughout those 10 considerations that there were several mentions of this thing called consciousness, which really helps us to deal with this task of constructing goodness. So next week when we get together again, we're going to talk about a few of the ideas about consciousness that Dr. Carroll talks about. And have a great week. Go Packers. Yeah. See you next week. All right. Thank you.